We're recording. You ready to do this?
Yeah.
All right. Good. But first, we'll talk about Talk Mobile. Talk Mobile is an innovator in retail and works with organizations like T-Mobile to operate stores throughout Arizona. Eric, have you seen a Talk Mobile?
I have not seen a Talk Mobile, but I hear you talk about it all the time.
That's right. I haven't seen one either, but I do know they're in Arizona, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Louisiana. I don't know if you're looking to make a career change because you're pretty well in your career, but for more information or to jumpstart your career or do a career change, you might want to visit TalkMobileNet.com. Again, that's TalkMobileNet.com, our primary sponsor. Welcome back to the Hard Parking Podcast. This week we are joined, as promised, by Eric of LastEra. Eric, what do you think about that engine noise that starts this segment?
It's good. Is that your car?
That is my car.
It is?
Yeah, that absolutely is my car. Cold start in the garage.
Nice, man. You got to get one with the blow-off valve going, though.
Yeah, I'll work on that next now that I have this external Zoom H5 handy recorder.
Well, you don't have one of those tunes where you got the pops and crackles and the annoying popcorn shit, do you?
No, I can't do the two-step. I can't do any of that. Actually, when I'm driving, right, if I'm just kind of coasting in second gear, maybe about somewhere between 20 and 35 miles an hour, it will shoot a little flame.
I saw that. I saw you posted something on Instagram where you had a little flameage going on, which is dope. But I'm glad your car is not making all those pops and crackles because there's people that overdo it, man, with those pop tunes, man. I'm glad your car just does the flames, but it doesn't do all the crazy noises. And
Well, you know, there's a whole culture of people who love those two steps and those, you know, and that was me making that noise with my mouth. I'm getting pretty good at sound effects, so you may have thought I was playing a live video, but I wasn't. That was actually me. But I mean, it's cool. I'm not into it. You know, cool. I think it looks kind of cool, you know, on Instagram when you see a car, you know, firing off flames and they have those competitions. But I don't know, besides completely destroying your muffler, what that does.
I don't either. But people love that shit, man. You're right. It's a popular thing, especially at the car shows. Yeah.
It's always so like Import Face Off and Elite Tuner, you know, some of the bigger events that travel around the country, they always have a two-step competition. And people gather around and they cheer and they love it. And then there's a few of my NSX guys. I think Michael Mao in California has a tune like that. But, you know, his car, I think, is also twin turbo. So at least it moves. I mean, some of these cars don't really move, but they do make a lot of noise.
I guess I get it, right? When you were a kid, did you ever used to ride your bike and stick like a can in the tire or like a baseball card just to make it sound like a motorcycle?
I mean, you're not American if you didn't stick something down there. I knew where you were going with that too, because absolutely you wanted that annoying ass noise, but you wanted to sound like a dirt bike or something.
Yeah. There's something about when you mod something, your bike, your car, that you wanted to make it sound cooler than, you know, it really is. I remember when I was 16 years old, driving around a beat up Honda Accord that my dad handed down to me it's probably a 1987 Honda Accord LX hatchback, if you remember what those look like with the flip-up headlights.
Yes.
And I think I went to like the local parts store. There was an AutoZone back then, but so it was something else. And they made these like aftermarket mufflers that you could just bolt on to your existing tailpipe. And I think it was like before like exhausts were like commonplace. They were just like bigger mufflers that you could just add on and made a little bit more sound.
Like some cheap auto parts shit.
Yeah, dude. And that's all you could afford. It's all I could afford when I was 16 years old. It was super, super cheap. Threw it on there and it sounded like shit. But
but to you, it sounded cool, right?
Oh, you thought it sounded cool for a hot minute. And then your friends are like, what the hell are you doing? No, and that looks like shit.
Bro, because they don't understand the life. It's the car mod life. Like people who aren't into cars, or even people who are into cars but not into the car show or the car mod game, they just do not understand. They don't understand why someone would want to put their car on bags. They don't understand why somebody would want to get fender flares. They don't understand why somebody would want to put decals on their cars.
Yeah. And, cars, we could talk about how cars are, when you were a kid, you wanted to make your bike like that. And then when you got a car, you wanted to make it like your own. And it's kind of like an extension of yourself. So you do stuff to your car. It never ends, right? Even if at the point when you do get a nice car, a decent car, you're still kind of doing those types of things. People never really understand why you do that. But car people, car enthusiasts, they get that doing that stuff to your car is like, it's just part of like the identity of what it means to own a car in the United States. It's very personal. So
I'm going back to putting the cards in your bicycle. What kind of bicycle did you have?
Oh man,
because I'm picturing you with like a Mongoose or a Redline or something premium.
I did have I had a Redline bike. I remember when I bought it. Of course you did. Well, first my mom bought me a bike at like Kmart or something that kind of looked like a Mongoose or Redline because you just couldn't spend that kind of money for getting me one of those bikes when it first started.
Was it a Huffy?
High school. It was like a Huffy. Yeah, Huffy, or what was it? Was it different? It was not Huffy. It was oh god, dude. It was one of those types of brands that was not like the Mongoose or the Redline BMX bikes. But anyway, it looked like it, but it was heavy as shit, right? It was like probably twice the weight of a Mongoose or Redline. It didn't have the cool pegs in the back. It didn't have the little gyro rotor where you could spin your handlebars all the way around without getting the brake lines all tangled up. You remember that?
Oh yeah, did it at least have free wheel? You can pedal backwards when you're going down the road.
It did have free wheel. And then even those bikes you would mod, right? You would throw stuff on that stuff, right? You throw the pegs on, put some stickers on it, stuff like that. So I didn't have like a fancy bike until probably later on in high school, but yeah, man, those are the BMX bikes back in the day. I think there's still a lot of people that are into that shit too, man. You could buy some vintage BMX bikes on eBay and they go for a good amount of money, I think.
We had a Huffy. So first, I remember my first bike had like the banana seat, and it had
a bike with a banana seat?
I had a bike with a banana seat. It was kind of like it was like
Was it a boy's bike?
Well, hold on, I'm not done. Okay, it had a kind of glittery seat, and it had the slanted bars, not the one that went straight across. Yeah, it was like a chick's bike.
I don't know.
So that was my first bike.
Those bikes.
And then I remember, I think it was Christmas or maybe it was birthday, because my brother and I had the same birthday. We're both February 9th. And we both had basically the same Huffies. So my parents brought home, we had blue Huffies. So they had the pads and everything on them. And that was like our first cool bike, although it's a Huffy. So, I don't know where Huffy's at today, but I know back in like 1985, they were heavy as shit. So you were basically describing, they weren't a Diamondback. Oh, maybe that's what you're thinking earlier. Because Diamondback was like, it was like the best of the mid tier. And then you got into the $1,000 red lines. So it wasn't one of those. But when you're talking about stickers, I'm thinking of like I would go across the street to Sack and Save, which used to be Safeway. Well, it was just literally right across the street from my house. But you go up to the machine, the sticker machine. You can either get a weird toy in those clamshell bubble containers.
You throw the quarter in there and you twist the thing. And
Yeah. Or you put 50 cents in because you wanted to get the ninja sticker and you'd push it in. It was kind of like, not really oil slick, but it was like kind of that diamond pattern oil slick stickers. You pull it out and you get the 50-cent sticker. And that's like the type of shit. It's either that or play heavy barrel, but you put that sticker on your bike, man. So my bike was covered with just stupid as shit.
Yeah, but the bike, when you had a bike, I also was a skater back then. So I was probably more a skater than I was a biker.
What kind of board did you have? Did you have a Tony Hawk, a Powell
Peralta? Powell Peralta with the two sides that look like basically the tail and the nose look exactly the same. They had the Tony Hawk skull on it. It was blue. My brother had a Tony Hawk, a different color. And it was our first skateboard. Well, we had first gotten like a cheap skateboard just to learn how to do it. And my parents bought us the Tony Hawk because we begged and we begged and we begged. And so I lived in Chicago. I lived in Skokie, which is a suburb of Chicago at the time. And we dragged my mom down to Evanston, to a skate shop called Tom Thumb. Those who are local to Chicago will know what I'm talking about. And you go in there, you're a young kid, right? You walk into a skate shop or a BMX shop, you're intimidated, right? There's people that actually have been doing it a long time. There's older kids in there, right? And then, you know, it's kind of your first time trying to buy. In this case, we were buying our first skateboard. We had no idea what the hell we were doing. We just watched, we just read about Tony Hawk in the skate magazines like Trans World or something like that. Skateboarder magazine.
Fucking Gleaming the Cube.
Gleaming the Cube, right? Watching, we know we wanted that board. We went in there, you know, like we want the Tony Hawk board. I don't remember how much it cost, but it probably cost a grip of money. But I remember getting that board and being so happy. And then I rode the shit out of the thing for years and years, right? And then it was like, just like the BMX scene. It was like, you know, you and your friends just riding around on the skateboards and the bikes. It was just like the best thing I remember about being in 6th, 7th, 8th grade before you get to high school and got your car.
Bro.
You're riding around on those BMXs and on those skateboards. Right?
Oh, I didn't have no car in high school. And I know that when it came down to skateboards, I always sucked. In fact, we tried to make one. I think my dad tried to make us a skateboard out of plywood. So he drilled the 4 holes for the 4 holes for the trucks. And put the trucks
sandpaper on the top.
Yeah, dude, the grip paper, bro. The grip paper, there was adhesive. The grip tape, there was adhesive on the back end. Yeah, you cut out your shapes and shit. So we had a skateboard made out of fucking plywood and some like this bright orangey red grip tape. And I mean, I couldn't ride it more than 10 feet anyway. I fucking sucked at shit like that. That's why I always stayed on a bike. I mean, we were always jumping ravines and shit. Like I was a daredevil on my bike.
Good memories, right? Like thinking about what you used to roll around in back in the day.
I remember my dad tried to get on the bike once. I'll never forget this shit. And I was trying to do a wheelie, and he was like, "I'll show you how." And I remember it was myself, my brother, my father, and my mother. For some weird reason, we're all out front because we never did it. It's like the only memory I have of all of us just chilling out in the front yard. Dad gets on the bike, tries to do a fucking wheelie, pops it way too hard, falls off the bike, lands on his ass.
How old are you at this point? How old's your dad?
I don't know, dude. I think maybe I was in middle school, like maybe 6th grade, maybe 5th grade. He had no business being on a bike. Like I've never seen my dad do anything remotely athletic ever. And he's trying to ride this bike and he fucking just busts his ass. Like who does a wheelie and falls off the fucking bike?
That's
like most people pull their feet down because they know they're about to fall. He didn't even pull his feet down, man. It's just,
yeah, and you know those bikes are not that tall, right? I mean,
like a ghost came and uppercutted his ass while you're sitting on the bike, man. It was. If he ever listens to this podcast, he might kick my ass.
He should. I was riding, so I took the kids out a couple of weeks ago, and they were riding their bikes, and I was riding the skateboard, and I literally, I was like, okay, I think I could do some tricks still. And I was like, okay, let me try to impress my kids, right? So I put the board in the driveway in between 2 cracks, right? So it wouldn't move, and I tried to do an ollie. I fell a few times, probably looked like an idiot to my neighbors, but my kids thought it was cool. And my son's 6 years old, right? So anything I'm doing right now is cool.
You pulled a Pete Finning is what you did.
Yeah, exactly. I did what your dad did. But yeah, man, it's hard, dude. It's like, how did you? I don't remember how I was able to do any of that shit back in the day.
When we get back, you want to talk about some Willy T Ribbs?
Yeah, Willy T Ribbs, Uppity.
When we get back, we'll talk about some Willy T Ribbs, and we'll talk about one of our sponsors. Welcome back. Before we continue, I want to tell you guys about NSX Channel. NSX Channel on Instagram, they sponsor our Instagram profile highlight of the week. We don't have one this week because we're going to be talking about Uppity. But NSX Channel is your number one source for NSX content. Whether you're bone stock, you look like a fighter jet like mine, or you just have some crazy shit going on, make sure you visit NSX Channel on Instagram. And again, we're joined by Eric Pasia today as a co-host, one of my favorite friends.
You're one of my favorite friends, but you still don't know how to pronounce my last name.
Pasia? We went through this last time. Pasia.
Pasha, man. Pasha.
That's what I said. Pasha. I've been saying Pasha the whole time. What did you hear?
You
Pasia?
don't want to correct people.
You do
you're
want,
my friend. You're my boy. I've known you for what? How many years now?
So it becomes embarrassing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. My manager at work, his name's Manuel. He told me a couple weeks ago that the CIO for like a year, he was calling him Miguel. Fucking Miguel. So he put up with that shit for a year.
You don't want to correct people. People don't want to correct other people, man. That's kind of rude, but that's completely off, man.
Fucking Miguel. I have a radiologist I used to work with, and I don't, Dr. Brink, if you ever listen to the podcast, I want to apologize, but we can all laugh about it today. So for years, I worked there for 4 years. He was calling me Jason. So much where I would joke about it with some of the other radiologists like Dr. Patrick, but he would always be like, Jason, and just start cracking up, because he knew my name was Jhae. But yeah, for the longest. And I never corrected him. No. He just, it's one of those things where, you could tell they're like bonding and buddying up with you. It's like, you know what I mean? You get that, Jason? Yeah, man. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, sure, Dr. Brink. But for 4 years.
Don't you hate when you realize you've been calling somebody pronouncing their name the wrong way for like years? Like the worst feeling. They're like, damn, why didn't you tell me? Well, I don't want to correct you. It's rude.
So at least once a podcast, it's going to be Pasia and Pasia.
Pasia, Pasha.
How about like Sasha, but with a P?
Yeah, there you go.
How about just Eric P?
Whatever you need to do to remember it. In high school, my teachers and my coaches, when I played sports in high school, they just call me Pasha, right? They wouldn't even call me Eric. And the problem was I have a huge family. I've got 50 first cousins all living in the same city. And so when you call Pasha out, it was always like, okay, who are you talking about?
Like everybody looks.
Yeah, everyone looks like Pasha. It was this kind of running joke.
It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Pasha heads pop up.
Yeah, pretty much.
I got to ask you something,
This time I'll correct you because
I think Pasha.
After a few years, it's not.
Sasha like Pasha. Pasha like, yeah.
There you go.
So you had some issues because right now you're recording from inside your Tesla.
Yeah,
and
man.
Like your house got all fucked up, and most people don't just pack up and move out when they have a small issue. What happened with you?
Big or small, but I'm coming to you straight from the driveway of my sister-in-law's house and my wife's Tesla. Hopefully you can hear me okay, but
yeah, you're fine.
Earlier tonight, I got home from work, and the funny thing is, my daughter texted me. She's like, "Dad, I can't flush the toilet." And I was like, "Oh God!"
You're like,
"What am I coming home to?"
Thank you for letting me know that. What would you like me to do about it when I'm at work?
It's Monday. I'm like, gosh, okay, I'll go home, take care of it, right? I'm thinking nothing of it. Get home. First thing I do when I walk in the door is I wash my hands. I pick up my son from school. I take him to the sink. We wash our hands.
He's dirty as fuck, isn't he? I mean, if the first thing you do when you get home from picking your son up from school is washing your hands.
Yeah, 6 years old and first grade, man. Come on, If I don't wash his hands before we leave school, I wash his hands when we get home, right? My wife's germaphobe. My whole family is like a germaphobe because my wife's a germaphobe. So we're always constantly washing our hands. So we wash our hands. We go in to try to wash our hands at the kitchen sink and the water doesn't go on. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm confused for like 10 minutes. Like, what the hell is going on? And so come to find out there was a water line in our neighborhood that busted. So they turned off the water. And I'm like, what the hell? Like,
so it wasn't local to your house. It was in your neighborhood.
Yeah. And so
got it. Okay.
It's one thing to to not have any electricity, because that's happened before where the electricity's gone out and it's kind of, it sucks, right? But to not have water, you gotta wash our hands, right? And you gotta take a shower and blah, 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 blah. Right?
Yeah, you gotta leave. You gotta leave if they shut the water off.
Yeah, you shut the water off. There's you got no choice, right? So we're washing our hands with like the water from the water cooler that we have in our house, right? Which is like an expensive way to wash your hands, basically.
Is it one of those machines, like those?
Yeah, it's like the machine
Culligan?
with the little, the Culligan sparklets shit.
We got that.
So I'm like, fuck this. I call my wife. I'm like, this is we gotta go to a hotel. Blah blah blah. This sucks. And she's like, oh, we'll just go to my sister's house. So we ended up packing up, which took a little while, jumping in the car, both cars, and hopping over here, which is nice. She doesn't live too far. and we could charge our car here because she has a Tesla. My wife, she can jump in the car tomorrow morning and be fully charged and ready to go. But, coming here, there's like 2 other kids and my son and my daughter. So it's a madhouse, right? Like they literally just went to bed. It's like a weekend. And so they're running around and stuff. And so it's been a little bit of a crazy Monday, man. But yeah, I'm recording live and direct from the front seat of my wife's Tesla in my sister-in-law's driveway.
So you guys have a Tesla. So Yvette asked me the other day, "Oh, Eric has a Tesla?" I go, "I don't fucking know what he has. He maybe his lease expired and he picked up something else. So you have a Tesla. So what do you have? What does she have?"
She has a Model 3. She had the, I don't know if you remember, but she had an X5 M Sport.
You picked up the X5 after you traded in the Audi Q7.
Yeah, we had the Q7, which fantastic car. Then we got the X5 M Sport, also a really good car. But we were driving one day, and all of a sudden the car just started to shake. The engine was shaking, and then it died.
So your BMW went BMW.
Pretty much, right? It's happened to me before in all my other BMWs. I don't know what it is. I've owned BMWs, for a long time. Every single BMW I've ever owned has left me stranded on the road.
Bro, every year I look at the best used cars, and they always say, avoid the BMW after 2 or 3 years. And they're beautiful cars, but they always have issues.
Yeah, it was weird, man. And, our X5 wasn't that old, right? And
couple years.
Yeah, it was like 3 years old. 3 years old. It was like, okay, well, it's under warranty, blah, 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 this and that. I had it towed. It was like the fuel pump or the fuel line needed to be replaced, whatever. And, it was all covered and whatnot. So it was a little more inconvenient than anything. But we were like, this sucks. Getting stranded on the side of the road because of some stupid mechanical issue on this BMW. And this is not the first time it's ever happened to us on our BMW. So we ended up, long story short, we said, okay, well, let's go test drive a Tesla. And we rented one on Turo just to kind of see and live with it for a weekend. And so we rented it for a whole weekend. She loved it, and we ended up buying one. So she drives it. It's her car. She loves it. It's a different kind of experience altogether, owning an electric car, owning a Tesla. It takes some getting used to, but it's been a pretty dramatic change of, just experience and lifestyle for her. And I think it's been awesome so far. I mean, it's crazy for me to say that because I love old cars.
Like so before this, were you pro Tesla or you're just like, whatever?
It was kind of like, whatever, right? I was kind of like, oh, they think they're so cool, these Tesla people, right?
Well, I mean,
people who own a Tesla
do think that,
always think they're so fucking cool, right? And that was just my perception. I'm like, all right, you got a cool car. It's fast. It's faster than my Porsche, probably. It is. It's got cool tech. I get it, right? I get it. It's the future. But I was always pretty hesitant to the whole idea of electric vehicles until she bought this car. And I'm like, I get it.
So did you guys buy it or did you lease it?
We bought it.
Okay.
We bought it. And I know you had an episode a while back where you were like, oh, should I lease an electric car or not? Because the battery after a couple of years and whatnot. Which I think is a fair point, and I think is a consideration when you're thinking about electric vehicles. But so we bought it brand new.
I don't see the Pasias keeping a car for 10 years.
Yeah, I don't know. We might not. It depends. I mean, these cars can go with the battery, I guess, for 200K more mileage, right? So the brakes, according to Elon, should never be able. You don't need to replace them. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't believe anything the guy says.
You shouldn't need to replace your brakes because it's regenerative braking, right? Blah, 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 right? The pads, you don't ever need to replace. The rotors, I don't know if I believe that.
They grow back? Like, what are we talking about here? That doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. But in any event, I'm still not like the guy. I'm not like a Tesla fanboy where like now that I own one, I'm going to go tell everybody about how awesome it is and then everything else sucks because I still love my car. I still get in my 993. I still love the old smell of it and the clunkiness of the doors when I open and shut them. I like the way it sounds. I love the way it feels, the experience of driving it. It's different in a Tesla where you don't really have that feeling. You're just driving, and it's an efficient way of transportation. That's how I see it.
I mean, but
Right.
it's your wife's car, and I don't see her rolling around in your Porsche.
Well, she likes riding in my Porsche. She just hates the idea of, let me take that back. She hated my last Porsche because it was loud. It smelled bad. It smelled like, race fuel, like no cats. And, she was embarrassed. She told me, I'm embarrassed to ride in this car. I was like, how are you embarrassed to ride in this car? I'm
Shame
embarrassed to ride
on her.
Yeah. She loves riding in the 993 though, because it's a different experience, right? It's not as crazy as the turbo. So, but if you line up my 993 against her Tesla at a stoplight,
Sure.
I get my ass kicked, dude.
Sure. But they're completely different. Completely different.
Oh yeah. 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 And that's okay. And I'm totally cool with that. And because I'm not trying to be, the fastest guy on the street with my old 25-year-old car. But these cars, they make the performance model versions of like all the different Tesla models. And you see them on YouTube, you see them test it. I mean, they are crazy fast, dude. They are so fast, and they're only going to get faster, right? From that standpoint, it's pretty cool. I don't know, what do you think about it? What are your thoughts on Teslas and electric vehicles? Have you come around to the idea of owning one?
I'm kind of the same with Teslas as you. It's like, get this Tesla. Good for you. Air jerk, But I know they're badass cars. I know they're badass cars. I'll give them their due. And people love them. I mean, every once in a while, a Tesla kills somebody. But it's just, it's just how numbers work, I guess. I don't like how they all look the same.
Yeah.
They're very cookie cutter. At the Fountain Hills show, there was a ton of Teslas and they all look the same. I'm like, okay, wow, that's like the rich man's Camry. It's like, because they didn't do anything to the car. Like I could, a couple of them had like cool body kits on them, but most of them, it's just like, let's just go to this cool car show and line up all of our Camrys, our bone stock Camrys. That's what it looked like to me. Which, by the way, dude, somebody had like a mid-90s Hyundai Accent. A white one.
I saw that in the photos. I'm like, what is this for real, dude?
And bro, it wasn't
like
cleaned up or anything. It's almost like they were looking for a place to park, and that's the only place they could find is right in the middle of the show. Like it wasn't.
Which is funny.
There was nothing special about that car. It wasn't even clean. It was kind of beat up.
That car show, you have to like get accepted into the car show. Don't they do some sort of like vetting? Not
today. Basically, you just have to pay money because it's all charity. And understand, I'm not bagging on somebody's car. It was just like really funny to see this Hyundai Accent at the end of this row of like Miatas. And it literally was someone's starter car daily.
Hey,
it's the car you give to your kid when your kid gets a license.
Hey, like I said earlier, man, it's like 16 years old, man. You have that mentality. You go to the local parts store, man. You're going to just make it your own, dude. So, hey, well, he's I'm sure he loves driving that car or she. And is proud of it, so clearly. But more power to them, man.
Yeah, man, it was amazing to see. You ready to talk about Uppity?
Yeah, let's do it, man. It's been out for a while now, right? How long has it been out for?
It actually hasn't. So Uppity launched earlier this month, so earlier in February. I want to say February 7th. Now, when I was listening to Ryan Eversley's Dinners with Racers podcast, they filmed the Willy T Ribbs episode in late 2017. And in that podcast, they were talking about it launching in 2018. So I'm not sure what happened because we're now in 2020.
I think distribution was trying to figure that out, right? Like, I didn't think they had to deal with Netflix when they first decided to do this, even though Corolla did the Paul Newman one, did the Shelby one, right? So I think it's distribution. It's so cool to see it being made and then getting to Netflix, and then all of a sudden, because it's on Netflix, becoming this kind of publicly exposed, because it's an amazing story, right? It's just a great documentary. So well done.
Speaking of some of his documentaries, did you ever watch the 24-Hour War?
Yeah, I watched it.
What'd you think? You
had mentioned it on one of your podcasts, and I got to it when I had the flu a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And I hadn't watched Ford versus Ferrari yet at that point.
But you have seen it now?
I saw it. Yeah, I just watched Ford versus Ferrari finally last weekend.
So what did
And
you think
I
of
was
24-Hour War, and what did you think of Ford versus Ferrari?
well for me. I really enjoyed 24-Hour War. Right. I mean,
It was really good.
I enjoyed Ford versus Ferrari, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But this is probably what you're probably thinking as well, right? We think a lot alike in terms of the different films like this. So 24-Hour War, the fact that all of that shit was going on, in the run up to Ford taking a run at Le Mans, all the stuff with Ferrari and kind of just the history of that race that was being told in 24-Hour War, and then a lot of the real stories behind the reason why Ford got in without all the Hollywood kind of embellishment to it was fascinating to me, right?
Yes.
Like we didn't grow up in the 60s, you and I, but so for us, we didn't live that. We kind of look back on it in history books and kind of in these kind of movies. So for us, it's kind of like, damn, like, okay, they were really like pissed. Ford was really pissed. Ferrari was really pissed. There was a big rivalry going on even before the race, before they got on track. And then they didn't succeed, in the first few times they tried to beat Ferrari. And so it just made for a really cool storyline with all these different characters. So it just felt like really, really cool racing history that I never knew about. I knew about it, but I never knew to that level of detail behind the scenes. So I really enjoyed it. I get nerdy about stuff like that. And then when I watched Ford versus Ferrari, which was pretty cool too, kind of seeing that right after 24-Hour War, because then you could see how they kind of maybe made a lot of things Hollywood and maybe kind of embellished on a lot of the different storylines. But what I took away from seeing both of those movies, was how cool the story was about Ken Miles.
See, that's right? The thing, because to me, and tell me if you agree, to me, Ford versus Ferrari was more like the Carroll Shelby, Ken Miles story.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that it was like the Ford versus Ferrari was kind of like in the background. And obviously in the 24-Hour War is in the foreground. And I also thought that in the 24-Hour War, they missed, they went again, they missed, and then they won.
Yep.
But I think in Ford versus Ferrari, they missed, they went again, and they won.
Yeah, I think they did that just to, make the story a little bit more efficient.
Sure. But I was like, did I remember that right? I thought they lost twice before they won. But
yeah, I mean, they did. And I mean, yeah, they did. They did lose twice before they won eventually. But the whole Ken Miles, so after I watched both, I just started reading up on Ken Miles a lot more, because without him, the GT40 would not be what it is, right? And just think about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without this driver, who was British born, grew up, came here to the United States, partnered up with Carroll Shelby and a bunch of other people, and all those dudes, Phil Remington, all the guys that were responsible for the development of the GT40, and he was instrumental in that. And that was not only instrumental in building that car, but instrumental in winning in Le Mans. And then it's just crazy to know that the GT40 wouldn't be here or what it is today without that dude.
Right? When you say Le Mans, you finish with like your face with like this super sad look on your face, like your mouth is like open when you finish saying it.
Yeah, I should take a picture and send it to you. Le Mans.
It sounds so douchey too. Like, are you a douchebag if you say Le Mans instead of Le Mans? But it is Le Mans. It's like Ibiza instead of Ibiza. All right, so we both love Ford versus Ferrari to a certain extent, and we love the 24-Hour War. Again, people who listen to this podcast, which by the way, I need to make an announcement. We now have an estimated audience of 10,000 people, minus 9,950. But we're growing.
Hey, man.
We're growing.
It takes one listener at a time, dude. I remember when we first did this, I was like, what, on the 4th or 5th podcast that you did? season 1.
Monterey. Hey, I live my life one podcast at a time. One podcast subscriber at a time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I wonder how many listeners. Yeah, you had maybe a handful of listeners back then. So
yeah, and I think now we're up to a baker's dozen.
Yeah. Well, you know.
By the way, not to rub it in, because if you were at home, you would be drinking with me. So I apologize.
What are you drinking? What do you got?
I'm drinking the Macallan Classic Cut 2019.
Never had that one.
Because you're all about the Johnny Walker.
Well, no, I mean, I am, but not.
I know you got range, but I have 2017 and 2018 at home, and I don't even know what they taste like because they're still shut. This is a 2019. I bought it out here in Rancho Mirage at Total Wine. I bought 2 bottles because I haven't seen a 2019 before. So one I'm smuggling home at some point, but I store my shit on the weekends. Like I literally bury it in the desert and then dig it up. Okay, actually, I don't, but I might start doing that for the story. Like, yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, you should do that. Where did I bury this bottle of scotch this week?
Because the only one who would find it if I buried it would be like a coyote who needs a drink. So,
well, you better be burying some good shit, man.
I mean, of course, but that's what I'm drinking, and it's pretty good. I don't love it, but it's good. But since I like to drink, I will finish this bottle before this contract is up. No, hell no. No, hell no. No.
Like, damn, bro. How long are we doing this podcast for?
Maybe by Thursday. But no, this will probably last me a few weeks. But yeah, that's awesome. That's what I'm drinking right now. So I apologize that you don't have anything. So
I don't have anything.
This is
cheers
to you.
My jam right now is Lagavulin 16. That's what I drink on a weekly basis now. And I keep buying it over and over again. And I'm obsessed with it, I guess, for the time being. So that's I wish I had a glass of that right now, but I'm sitting in my wife's Tesla in the driveway and I don't have a glass of scotch like you do. So
all right, let's talk about Willy T Ribbs. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, I talked a little bit about it on the last podcast, but also talked more about some of my own experiences during those times and how blown away I was. Just looking at the dates and then comparing them to what was really going on outside of motorsports, because I was so disappointed. I mean, to me, NASCAR was a given. Hate to be stereotypical, but NASCAR to me was a given. But when all the other stuff happened, he went overseas. He said overseas he was looked at as just another racer until he wasn't.
Until he ran out of money.
Right. You run out of money and you need sponsors. And sponsors ain't looking at you no more. On the front end, what are some of your thoughts on what you saw? And then we can step through some of the other stuff.
Well, I mean, first of all, like, does it surprise me that he experienced that in each period of time he was a racer? No, it didn't surprise me.
Why? Why didn't it surprise you?
I don't know. I just believe that in a sport like racing, sport like golf, breaking in as a person of color is going to be hard, no matter what. Then you add in the added kind of complexity of money and having enough money. Then you throw in the complexity of, well, do I have the right support? Do I have the right team? Do I have the right car? Do I have the right mechanics? Right?
I mean, because you have to have money. And during those times, it's like the African Americans haven't started to prosper nearly as much, at least in the 70s.
Yeah, and money is the great equalizer, right? In a sport like that.
Yeah.
Money and exposure. And so the story of Willy T Ribbs, from the moment he decided that he was going to spend his college saving, his money for college that his parents were saving, to go to England to take a shot at racing in Formula Ford, he was basically saying, listen, I'm going to go out there. I don't know what I'm going to do. I think his parents gave him $10,000 for 1 year. I think what it was.
And that's
so he spent, yeah, that's a lot of money back in the day. And he said he ran out of money, with 4 or 5 races left. He didn't have any money. He spent the money. And so it just so happened that he was so far ahead in the point standings because he won that many races by that point in the season that he was going to win the championship anyway, even though he ran out of money, right? Which is crazy to me. And that he had to hustle to make more money while he was out there. He was boxing in the pubs, trying to earn some money like on the weekends.
Yeah, because they covered that in the Dinners with Racers podcast.
Did they? Yeah,
Dinner
so he's doing all kinds
with
of other shit.
Racers podcast, because I know it sounded like I said Dinner with Racist podcast.
Yeah, racers.
Racers with an R. This time the ER is appropriate. So dinner with racers.
Racers, not racists.
Not racist.
But it might as well have been, right? Like at the end of the day, it didn't surprise me that he had that experience. But what did surprise me was how he experienced it, right? Like where and in what way.
Yeah.
And how he handled it. How did he deal with that kind of shit as it was happening to him?
He said no one ever really blatantly called him names to his face. Apparently he was good with his hands. Like he could throw down. Yeah,
that's what I read and what I heard is that, he didn't want to fuck with him.
When he was 6 years old, he followed Dan Gurney around the track. We'll circle back to that later on in the timeline, but I thought that was a really awesome story. So a 6-year-old, he takes a picture with his hero.
Dan Gurney, right? That's like, it's like it's like my son who's 6 going and taking a picture with Lewis Hamilton, right? Or, world champion Formula One driver or a really famous race car driver, right? Mario Andretti.
I think what was amazing about this documentary is there were so many names of people that are like no one, only diehard racing people know who Willy T Ribbs is. I had no idea. I remember hearing Adam talk about it, and I'm talking about Adam Carolla. I remember hearing him talk about Willy T Ribbs the last few years. But even then, I knew he was like, hey, he's a race car driver, and we're going to talk to him. But until this documentary came out, I completely forgot. But some of the names that were in this documentary, like those are household names in auto racing. And I'm like, holy shit. Like he rubbed shoulders with these guys. He was teammates with these guys. He punched these guys in the face. Fucking
he raced against a lot of these guys, right? He beat these guys.
Fucking Caitlyn Jenner. Come on,
That was
a badass story.
Like, holy shit, really? I was like, damn, I was surprised by that.
Right. He was racing, and I think it was a Scott Pruitt and at the time Bruce Jenner. He's racing with them against them, and they're doing qualifying. Scott Pruitt cuts him off, causes him to wreck. He goes up to Scott Pruitt, punches him a couple times. Normal shit, right?
Yeah. And then, normal racetrack shit.
And then Bruce Jenner hops out of his car and steps up, and he basically says, look, you do track and field. You come any closer, I'm going to take that pole vault and I'm going to stick it up your ass. Bruce Jenner was like, I don't want any of this shit. I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that was funny as shit. It was funny as shit and kind of cool to see Caitlyn Jenner in 2020 tell the story.
Yeah, that was pretty neat to see. But that was the dynamic back then, man. Like, he had to basically fight tooth and nail for everything that he was, trying to do, and basically win races, get noticed, so that he could continue to try to work towards his goal, which was to be in the Indy 500 or Formula One, right?
Right. And I found out he wasn't the first. There's been a lot of African-American drivers that have tried at all this stuff. I think the thing with Willy T Ribbs is he was the first successful, because I was telling an old coworker about the Willy T Ribbs documentary, and she had mentioned that her next door neighbor is Wendell Scott's granddaughter. Wendell Scott is an African-American born in 1921 and died in 1990. And not to be funny, but his pictures online, they look like John C. Reilly. Yeah. So
John C. Reilly.
Yeah. So these photos of Wendell Scott, you got to look at it on your phone if you can. Like Wendell Scott looks like John C. Reilly. Yep. It's funny as fuck. But anyway, he started racing. He's been in NASCAR. He raced in the 60s, bro. He spent 13 years in the NASCAR Cup Series. Total wins in 16 years, 1. He led 27 total laps in 13 years. But he was an African-American who raced in NASCAR Cup Series. So Willy T Ribbs wasn't the first person to try NASCAR. I can't even imagine what Wendell Scott went through. But yeah, this guy legit raced. He raced in the Grand National Series, which Willy T Ribbs also did. He raced in the K&N Pro Series. But sorry, well, so back to Willy T Ribbs. So 1977, he does Formula 4.
Formula Ford.
Ford. Yep, over in England.
Ford, F-O-R-D.
Yep. But thank you. Yeah, so Formula Ford, because I watched it twice, and both times I was confused. Especially because you go from Formula
if you have the
Ford.
If you have the subtitles on Netflix, it'll tell you it says 4. But it's Ford.
But they say he goes from Formula Ford to Formula 3. So you're like, wait, was it 4? Because it went from...
It's not 4.
Yeah, but it went from Ford to 3.
Yeah.
Scorpion Racing, Mike Eastick gives him a crappy car. What, he finishes third in qualifying in the piece of shit car, right?
Yeah.
So they put him in a decent car, and he beats a future Formula 1 champion.
Fittipaldi.
Yeah. That's a name people should know.
Emerson Fittipaldi.
So he wraps up championship before the season's over in front of Eccleston, Bernie.
If people don't know who Bernie Ecclestone is, he's a very important figure in the whole history of Formula One.
Absolutely.
Right? And he's also a very important figure in the growth of making Formula One into a global sport.
Like the David Stern of racing.
Pretty much, right? He's a pioneer, and he's done so much for that sport. So Willy T Ribbs being in front of or being exposed to or interacting with Bernie Ecclestone that early on in his career, I think was a big deal.
Age of 22. He fucking whoops everyone's ass in front of Bernie. Bernie's impressed. No sponsorships for Formula 3. Goes home. I was like, what the hell?
Money, man. Told you. Money and sponsors, dude. The dude kicked everyone's ass in the Formula Ford, right?
Yep.
I mean, can you imagine being that talented and if he had gotten a shot at Formula One coming out of Formula Ford, how different his career would have been? Think about Lewis Hamilton, who was born when I think Willy T Ribbs was midway or early on in his career, and him getting the ride and the opportunities that he got because somebody noticed his talent and decided to pour a lot of money into his career. And look where that got him. Right?
And for people who don't know, Lewis Hamilton is a British racing driver who was mixed race. He was born in 1985, so that's right in the middle of this documentary. Lewis Hamilton is regarded by many as the greatest race car driver in modern day.
Yeah, he's about to be 7-time world champion this year if he wins, right? So he's always had the opportunities, the right car, the right sponsorship, the money behind him. And look where it got him.
Yeah.
He has talent, 100%. Yeah. But Willy T Ribbs didn't have that opportunity. He went home.
I believe a lot of the stuff that Willy T Ribbs went through helped pave the way for people like Lewis Hamilton. And he had the benefit of being born across the sea, so he didn't have to put up with a lot of the bullshit that people have to put up with in America. Here. Because like I said in the last podcast, I mean, people, stop getting so offended. We're not that far removed historically. Like, if you were to take history of civilized man and put the riots of the 60s and everything that America, one of the youngest nations in the world, has gone through, those lines between the 60s and 2020 would be so close, you would have to literally zoom in like 6 times to see any separation.
It's crazy.
Overseas, it's not like that because overseas has been around forever.
Thousands of years or a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
We're learning, right? We have our history, and it's our history. And so the fact that he had to endure, that was when he was doing it, was when he was trying to blaze a trail for this. And I think when you look at the interviews and you read a little bit more about Willy T Ribbs after you see this documentary, you kind of get the sense that he wasn't trying to be the first black guy in racing. He was just trying to be a champion. He wanted to be an Indy 500 driver. He wanted to be a Formula One driver. And then people brought it to his attention, said, listen, Muhammad Ali, for instance, right? You mentioned all the people he came across. Yeah, you're gonna have to do this different. People are gonna not like what you're doing, and you're gonna have to figure out how to deal with that. The fact that Muhammad Ali is giving him this advice at that period of time, right? If you know your boxing history and your Muhammad Ali history and the shit that he went through.
Yes.
I think it really kind of set him up, right, to be able to deal with that, as well as his childhood with his grandfather and how he was raised. So,
yeah, so that was early in his career when he was overseas, right? So it was like either 77 or it was, well, it wasn't, let's see, so it could have been 78 when he was doing Formula Atlantic. But he told the story not on this documentary, but on the Dinners with Racers podcast, how he waited up all night for Muhammad Ali because they were in the same hotel. Because he's like, well, what do you do? He goes, I race cars. He goes, ain't no bleep racing cars,
Mm-hmm.
Ain't no black folks racing cars. But that's where they built their friendship. And he said he used to hang out with Muhammad Ali like at least once a month. But I cringed when I heard that because I was like, Muhammad Ali, he ain't shy. Willy T Ribbs, he was cocky as shit. Because people don't like people who show out. And I don't care if you're black or you're white. There's people who don't like people who show out. They like people who are more reserved and humble. So he was like, he had two things going against him.
Yeah, I mean, he was, but I think he couldn't pull any punches, right? He needed to be that way. He thought he needed to be that way to be able to succeed, at least to be able to be taken seriously. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he said, I'm no second-rate citizen. And he's right. Like, I would have handled things a little differently because of who I am. But I completely understand, you got to be who you are and you can't bow your head down. And I think he may have kind of gotten his own way a couple times, but the overall picture was bullshit. And he finally pushed through.
Yeah, it was a lot of bullshit, man. And I think from what I read and listen to about him, he knew he had to be that way. He knew he couldn't pull any punches. And then, his famous saying was like, if you don't like it, then beat me.
Absolutely. Right? You hear that in sports all the time now. They're like, well, you're running up the score. Well, stop me.
Yeah. You don't like it? Beat me. So you kind of have to respect that mindset, even though you didn't like the guy for the way that he was doing it, or people didn't like him for the way he was going about it. He was unbeatable a lot of the time.
And so in between, before he gets any real breaks, right? So he goes to Europe, dominates, no sponsors. Comes home, hits Formula Atlantic, Long Beach Grand Prix. Finishes Formula Atlantic, gets no shot. He dominated, no shot. Enter Humpy Wheeler, the blonde Don King, air quotes, 1978, NASCAR, the NASCAR 600. People lose their shit, not allowed to go to Talladega or Daytona. Like, racist as shit. And by the way, until I saw this, and this is really weird, until I saw this documentary and listened to the other podcast. So what do you think about when you see the rebel flag?
I mean, what do I think about it?
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of people feel a certain way, regardless of where you're from, where you grew up, or whether or not you're from this country or not. And when you see that, I think people feel a certain way about what it used to represent or what it might represent. And I think the fact that it makes people feel a certain way, even today, is enough for me to be able to say, hey, listen, you need to figure out what to do with that, right? Like, I understand it's a part of our history and we should own it, but I think it's also one of those things that make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, like it should have an asterisk mark, like the guys who were accused of doing PEDs. So for me, it's like, I understood both sides of the argument. For personally, when I think of the rebel flag, I think of the General Lee, because I used to watch Dukes of Hazzard all the time.
Same.
And when I went to school in Garland, Texas, I went to North Garland, which was the Running Raiders, which was Yosemite Sam. And South Garland was the South Garland Colonels. And South Garland High School used that flag because the Colonels was part of, in that instance, the Civil War of the South. So it was a Civil War colonel. Yeah. And I never, ever associated with having anything to do with, like, I knew it was Civil War, but I never associated with it having anything really to do with modern day racism. And then when it became such a big topic the last couple of years, I was kind of like where you were at, where you said, it's like, man, I understand why people are uncomfortable with it. We need to find a way to maybe allow it, but still not allow it. But to,
well, I think if racing, if motorsport, NASCAR, whatever, it doesn't matter, really wants to equalize, the playing field,
they gotta get rid of it
in terms of diversity, then it's something that they can do tomorrow, right? It's something they can do lots of things starting tomorrow. You know what I mean? Whether it be getting more sponsorships for people who are trying to break in, who are people of color, equalizing the playing field in a lot of different ways as it relates to kind of the money involved in the sponsorships and the corporate support, etc. I mean, they could do that shit tomorrow, dude.
They could, but they don't want to. That's
but they don't.
NASCAR is the only professional major sport who still flies a Confederate flag.
And, that's their prerogative. And so if we want to see, if we consumers, people who attend the races, people who support it, want to see more of that, then, we're going to have to make sure they know that that's how we want to, where our dollars are going should go towards advancing the sport in that way. It's hard because I think up until this point, it hasn't been, focused, right? Or there have been, endeavors to get more diversity, whether it be women in racing, people of color, right? But compared to other tier 1 sports, it's like completely far behind.
Yeah, it was just sad to see.
It's sad. It's sad to see. It's sad, but it is what it is. And Willy T Ribbs, I feel like his mindset was, I'm not going to be a victim to this.
Right.
I'm just going to go out here. I'm going to race my ass off. I'm going to win. If you can't beat me, then shut up.
1982, Formula Atlantic beats out Al Unser Jr., household name, Michael Andretti, household name, qualified 0.3 seconds faster than the entire field. Now, for those of us who watch racing, and you far more than me, but I know 0.3 seconds is a long ass time.
Yeah.
Leads more than half the race. Engine failure takes him out. No one cared. Back to the family business, driving vans for his father. Again, that's after qualifying almost half a second faster than anybody else. Destroying Al Unser Jr.
leading that race. Yeah, he was leading that race most of the race.
Yep. Led more than half of the race before his engine takes him out. Still nothing. Paul Newman calls him. The famous Paul Newman. Paul Newman lands him an opportunity in the Trans Am Series as a paid driver. So this is his first opportunity as a paid driver for the Budweiser. For Budweiser, not the Budweiser. For Budweiser driving a Camaro. Newman is his teammate in the iconic 1983 Datsun. But they both have different motivations because Newman's doing it for sport and Ribbs is doing it to make a living. And it was so cool to me how Newman was like, he saw that and he understood it. And he even told Willie, it's like, look, man, we're racing for 2 different reasons. So if you beat my ass out there, I don't care.
Right.
For me, it's casual. For you, you can grow from here. Then he ends up teaming up with David Hobbs. And you and I talked about David Hobbs a little bit offline. You had some takeaways about Hobbs. What are your takeaways?
I mean, racing is competitive, period, right? Like the most competition and tension that you're gonna have as a race car driver is with your teammate, right? Because you're both trying to win in the same car effectively.
Which I admittedly I was just clueless how your teammate could be not only your biggest competition, but your most hated rival in a sense.
100%.
Like I was just like, wait, what?
You're trying to be the number 1 driver on your team.
Period.
Because then you get the opportunities, you get the money, you have the better car typically. And so you're fighting. If you're the number 2 driver coming in like Willy T Ribbs was with David Hobbs, you're going to do everything you can to try to beat the shit out of that guy on the track. And you're probably not going to like each other.
And what was clear to me is that Willy T Ribbs, according to this documentary, was superior to David Hobbs. Like, he was beating his ass in every race until he was asked to not win so that Hobbs can win the Drivers' Championship. He let him win that race and then beat his ass again for the rest of the season. Alonso Jr. said he was unbeatable in the Trans Am car. Now, in the last podcast, I had mentioned David Hobbs. Yeah, I've met David Hobbs more than once. And yes, I've had drinks with David Hobbs at the iconic Seepkins Bar in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. There's a painting on the wall that has all these great racers. Obviously, I wouldn't know to look for Willy T Ribbs because I haven't been there in a few years. But David Hobbs is in there. Andretti's in there. Zanardi's in there. My friend Peter Cunningham is in that painting.
Is he really?
He is. Because he owns Road America. Like, he has almost every record in Pirelli World Challenge, but before his Pirelli World Challenge, like, he owns all those fucking records. And so he's good friends with David Hobbs, which is why I know David Hobbs. Like, he wouldn't, if they're like, hey, do you know Jay Finning? He'd be like, who? You know? But,
it's cool, though, that you know you've met him and spent some time.
And then that was in 2016 when I went there for the Vintage Car Weekend. And then he was a guest speaker, our keynote speaker at NS Expo 2017, also up in Elkhart Lake. So I've been around him a couple times. Yeah. But I mean, I don't personally know him. So for people who listen to the last podcast, like, I don't personally know David Hobbs. But I just thought it was amazing for me to watch this documentary and have him pop up on there and have, you know, a decent amount of airtime.
Yeah. And I mean, he's so they were battling as teammates should. Yeah, there was some shit that went down between them that wasn't on the up and up. And he ended up leaving that team after that season, right? After David Hobbs won the championship.
Yeah. And also, I didn't know that the top team driver, quote unquote, got the best equipment. Like, I just thought everyone was rolling with the same shit on the same team, at least.
I mean, usually in like Formula One, for instance, the idea is that both guys have equal cars, pretty much, right? But yeah, that's the kind of shit that happens in racing, man. Like, inter-team tension and dynamics. The Trans Am series was his big break. Paul Newman was kind of the trigger for getting him into that big of a racing series, and he did well in Trans Am. Yeah,
and they said he was uncoachable, which I can understand. Even the guys in the documentary who were obviously on his side were saying he was, you read between the lines, he was kind of a pain in the ass as a teammate, as whatever. So I can understand how he would fall out of favor with management, color of his skin aside, but that didn't help. You know, and he had a great relationship with Jack Roush until Don King showed up. And that's when Jack Roush starts fucking with his engines.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there was a lot of bad shit in racing and a lot of racism that wasn't necessarily directed or direct to him. There was a lot of that. But there were a lot of people along his career path that helped him.
Absolutely.
Along the way. And we're good. And we're the good parts of racing. We're the good people that, you know, saw his talent.
Jim Truman
decided,
from
Red Roof Inn.
From Red Roof Inn. You know, Jim Truman
Paul
and Paul
Newman. Truman. Yep.
Those are there. I mean, he had a handful of like top end supporters once he started getting a role. So regardless of what anybody else, how they treated him, he had people who wanted him in there because they understood that it was just straight up talent. Now, how about Paul Leffler? Remember him? He was the chief mechanic. The first shot he gets in 1985, and this Paul Leffler guy wouldn't even talk to him. And he was the chief mechanic. And he was saying that, man, Indy 500 in those cars, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to fucking die.
Yeah. I mean, that whole first stint of Willy T Ribbs going to Indy and getting a ride, he jumped in this car that he never tested before. He gets the car. It's not right. Yep. All these other teams have been testing for a month.
Chief mechanic doesn't want to fucking fuck with him either. So you got this shitty car and you got a guy who hates you.
Yeah, what the hell, man? Like, how would you feel walking into a situation like that? It's your dream to make it,
bro.
Try to qualify.
1985. We're not talking 1965, 1925, 1985.
Yeah, it's sad, dude. It's disappointing, but at the same time, again, like I said earlier, am I surprised I had to deal with that shit? No. I mean, I mean, there's a lot of shit that goes on today, right?
Right. Like I
this
said,
is just
not that far from the 60s.
not that far, right? And so, it's unfortunate that he had that experience, but it was probably the right decision that he made to walk away from that car, that first go around at Indy and say, listen, this is not right. I don't feel right. It's not the right situation. I'm stepping away.
1985, after he says fuck it and walks away from the Indy 500, which he got a lot of shit for, goes back to the Trans Am Series, teams up with Wally Dallenbach Jr., who was all throughout this documentary. They dominate as a teammate, but one of the cool things was the rental car scene in Days of Thunder. Remember, they said that scene they stole from Wally and Willy. Because they rented cars and they were driving like shit all the way to the track, and they fucked those cars up. And there's that scene in Days of Thunder. Thought that was funny. Yeah,
it's hilarious. I felt like the whole dynamic of Dallenbach and Willy T Ribbs was a lot better, right, than him and Hobbs.
Yeah, him and Hobbs, absolutely. They were highly competitive, but they respected the hell out of each other.
Which is the way it should be.
Right.
I mean, so he goes and then he gets his other. What's the year he gets his next shot?
So this is in Detroit, 1985. Don King shows up again, and this was when Jack Roush, who had. So this is when Wally and Willie, they were dominating. They had a great relationship with Jack Roush. So everybody, Jack Roush is Roush Mustangs. So if you get a Roush Mustang, it's Jack Roush. So Jack Roush changes his attitude towards Willie completely, like night and day. Sabotages the rest of his season. So from the point that Don King shows up, all of a sudden, Willie, who's never had any issues before, has car failures every race for the last 4 races. Goes into the last 4 races on top of all the points, ends up falling out of the points, and Wally wins the series. And that was the last time he raced for Jack Roush.
That story to me
That's some fucked up shit.
That's a wild story, dude. Just the pettiness of that whole situation, just because some dude really has some aspirations.
So when we come back, we'll tell you about another one of our sponsors. Welcome back. We're going to finish talking about Willy T Ribbs, but first I want to talk about DressUpBolts.com. DressUpBolts.com has titanium bolts, and maybe some of Willie's cars would have held together a little bit better and looked better had they gone to the future and hooked up with Seth and my friends over at DressUpBolts.com. DressUpBolts.com, titanium bolts have vastly improved the look of your vehicle, but serve a purpose as well. Available to dress up the engine and the engine bay, in case you have both. They have kits ready to go for your specific application. Probably don't have race car applications, but they probably do have the hardware for it. In fact, Eric, I could see the ones I have on my car looking nice on yours. Like with,
do they make them?
Why would they not? But with Porsches, like yours, like the air-cooled Porsches, I don't really see a lot of them on display from a motor aspect unless they have like those big, crazy turbos.
Yeah, man, I don't need to be sure. There's no reason to show my motor.
Not a lot to show there is what I'm getting at.
No, there isn't. Not yet.
Maybe yet.
Not ever.
Yeah,
Maybe not ever.
So let's pick up 1986. Goes back to NASCAR. This is after he goes to Portugal. This has the F1 cars. Beats their target time by a full second. Ends up being nothing more but some stupid side bet like that movie Trading Places. The Italians want the Italian drivers, which to me is no surprise.
Nope.
You know, to me, I wasn't surprised at all that. I was a little shocked at the bet. You know, they're kind of fucking with him, but I wasn't surprised he didn't get picked up because those international races, those countries want their people. Because their people want their people to represent them in these races. So no surprise there.
Remember Ford versus Ferrari when they booted Surtees, who is the Ferrari driver that was supposed to start the race, and ended up putting like one of the guy's nephews, right?
Yep, like the people want their own drivers. I mean, the Miles thing, they didn't want Miles in the car. Ford wanted their own drivers, even though Ken Miles was the guy. So we go to 1986. He wins his first race in the Winston Cup Series, and he's on a roll. By this time, unfortunately, Jim Truman is like really sick. So by the third
Yep.
race at Watkins Glen, he has engine failure. All his engines blew by the fourth lap. Okay, so this is the one where the engine builder was nowhere to be seen. So Jim Truman passes away this year. Super sad. Like, this is the one part of the documentary where you can tell Willy was tearing up. Because this guy gave him like all these chances when most people weren't believing in him. I felt sad. I was like, fuck. That was a sad shit. As much as the documentary would anger you a little bit and disappoint you a little bit, this was to me the sad part of the documentary.
100%. He played such an instrumental role in his career, and at the end of the day, the dude did so much for Willy and for other people. Right? He was just this genuine person who wanted to see Willy succeed and supported him throughout his entire career, whether it be money or trying to get him opportunities. And then he passes away. It's sad. It's sad to see.
That was tough. He kept giving him chances when other people wouldn't. And it was heartbreaking. It's part of life, but it was heartbreaking. But by this time, his career was turning around. He was running IMSA in 1986, went to race with Ryan Falconer against Jack Roush, so he finally gets his payback. He finishes second to Dan Gurney's Toyotas. And remember, Dan Gurney, when Willy was 6 years old, takes a picture with his hero.
That was cool. Everything come full circle.
Yes, because in 1987, Ribbs was driving for Dan Gurney, his childhood hero.
It's crazy, man.
And this is when we get the Bruce Jenner and Scott Pruitt story, which is shady as hell. How Scott Pruitt's girlfriend said that Willy hit her when he was hitting Pruitt, gets suspended.
Yep.
First driver ever suspended from IMSA.
Yeah. I mean, that's bullshit. The odds are against them. You mess up, you get, it's punitive. You get punished in a different way, which sucks. But I mean, it happened. A lot of odds against him.
I don't suspect he was suspended for very long, because later that season he comes back, Del Mar, Toyota versus Ford. So Ribbs is in the 99 Celica, edges off Scott Pruitt in the number 11 Ford. Toyota wins the manufacturing championship. So he comes back and wins the manufacturer's championship for his idol, Dan Gurney. Meanwhile, Ribbs wins driver of the year. So shit is like seriously on the up and up.
Yeah, that was a big turning point.
After that, nothing. Enter Bill Cosby, 1988. Hi to the Cosby Show, America's Dad. Bill Cosby comes out and says, I'll put $350,000. He's the most popular man in America. Spokesman for Jell-O. Spokesman for Coke. Jell-O. Spokesman for Kodak. Goes to all those companies. No support. I was floored.
Yeah, the reasoning they got from a lot of these companies is a bullshit, dude. Right? We're not into racing. Meanwhile, Coke has
Coca-Cola.
The NASCAR race.
Yep.
Right.
There's like, we're not into racing, and they sponsor us like the Coca-Cola 600 or some shit.
Yeah, it's bullshit, man.
Derek Walker, though. Former factory Porsche IndyCar team, Walker Racing. Enter this guy. This is when shit starts really happening. So he goes to Indy in 1991, finally, with $350,000 from Bill Cosby because they couldn't raise another penny, in one piece of shit car. Most teams have several cars. You get 3 chances per car. He finally lands an engineer in Tim Waldrop. 3-time Indy winning engineer. So everything is falling into line. You could tell watching this part of the documentary, it's like, oh shit. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
They have 1 month to qualify. They keep blowing these fucking Buick motors. They keep blowing up on them. No money, no motors. We're at the last weekend of the month. You have to do 4 laps, 10 miles to qualify. And the qualification is different. So they take your average speed and match it up against the other racer's average speed. So it's not like most qualifying where you can have 3 subpar laps and 1 badass lap, and they take your best lap. This is your average speed.
They take the average of all of them. Yep.
They don't get a motor. They start doing a lot of lobbying to Buick. I would imagine you probably have to play the race card. Like, can you imagine what would happen if they doesn't do this? And we tell the world that you didn't step up Buick and help this guy? Like, is that really what you want your legacy to be? Now, I'm shocked because this is 1991 and they're having to bend someone's arm backwards to get it support still. 1991. So Buick finally gets him a motor. Now, they're at bump day, right? This is the last day to qualify. They were within the last hour to qualify.
Yeah.
One last attempt. Like, you can't make this shit up. Since they burned through the first 2 attempts already. Because remember, each car gets 3 attempts. They burned through 2. What happens? With everyone watching, he finally takes a run at history. And he does it. He goes through, and each lap is faster and faster. He's averaging these speeds. Higher speeds than he's ever averaged to the first 2 attempts. He becomes the first African-American ever to qualify for the Indy 500 in 1991, which is what he set out to do as a goal. He raced with Emerson Fittipaldi, AJ Foyt. These are household names, guys. He ended up going out with a mechanical failure. He came back in 93 and finished all 500 miles. He didn't win the race, but he went out a race car legend and a winner. Like, he finally got to his goal after all the bullshit and accomplished it. Now, I'm sure his ultimate goal was to win the Indy 500. But when you get to that point, man, that's like you're going up against the best of the best of the best of the best of the best.
And you are doing it in an inferior car.
That's, yeah.
And you know it's inferior. You know it's not going to be competitive. But you're doing it. You still are able to get there. Qualify. Get on the grid. Race around, 500 miles. At the biggest race in the history of motorsport, on this side of the world. That in itself is, like you said, I think was his dreams to be able to be there. And had he been put in a similar machine to the drivers that are at the front of the grid, who knows? Could have won that race.
He obviously had the skill, because going through all these years that we've gone through, he's beaten some household names. He's dominated some household names. And that's just amazing.
Well, you know what surprises, maybe not surprises. Do you know what impresses me the most about this whole documentary? Was that you put him in a car, any car, IMSA, Formula Ford,
Trans Am Series,
Indy, Trans Am, Formula One. You could throw him in the car, no practice, couple of laps, and he's going to throw down.
Bro, he killed it in a Mercury Capri.
I mean, who can do that? And
Willy fucking T Ribbs.
And so it just tells you how much talent this dude had. And then you combine it with the brashness, his bravado, his confidence, his cockiness that you said, and just the way that he approached, the whole sport. It just it's impressive, man. And regardless of what color his skin was, black, white, whatever, it's impressive that anyone could do that.
So here we are in 2020. According to Wiki, to date, only 7 African American drivers have started at least one race in what is now called the Monster Energy Cup Series, which is NASCAR. So still in 2020, like you were alluding to earlier, that is one of the major, I wouldn't say major sports, because NASCAR itself isn't a sport. It's a classification within a sport. But to America, it's a major classification of NASCAR. To this date, there's only been 7 people.
Yeah.
Which is,
again, like I said earlier,
amazing.
That could change tomorrow, or start to change tomorrow. You know what I mean? And I don't doubt there are people in the sport with a lot of influence that have been trying to make that happen, right? Like I said earlier, in his career, there were many, many good people to him.
Yep.
And that's encouraging. And that's extremely, it makes you optimistic about where it could go. But golf did it. Tennis did it, right? All these other sports that were hard to break into.
I mean, tennis, Arthur Ashe. I mean, that was a long time ago.
Arthur Ashe, Tiger Woods, lots of other, black athletes in a lot of other sports. But just think about like how much money goes into these the sponsors, the people that watch these sports, right? And that pay these sponsors, right? Whether it be Coke or Budweiser or whatever. It doesn't, they're black, white, whatever, Hispanic. So there's really no reason why we couldn't make that change to be more diverse in motorsport. And I know all over the world that it's less, it's more probably easier to do that. But even across the world, there's not a lot of African American drivers in a lot of the other race series.
Dude, going back to what we were talking about earlier, Mr. Lewis Hamilton across the seas. According to what I read so far, and it could be wrong, he's still the only African American in Formula One history.
Formula One, the only one.
But not only is he the only one, 6-time F1 champion, 84 race victories, 151 podium finishes, and the current record holder for all-time career points, all-time pole positions, and Grand Slams in a season.
Right, so he's not done.
He's not done.
It's kind of like LeBron and Jordan, the whole kind of debate. LeBron
or Jack Nicholson and Tiger, right?
Right. But yeah, at the end of the day, Lewis Hamilton, only one in Formula One, but he just happens to be
regarded as damn near greatest. one of the greatest, and some say is the greatest.
Yeah.
So I asked people to give me their non-car and their car questions of the week. And I get all sorts of questions. Some of them are really good. Some of them tell me that they obviously don't listen to the podcast. So let's get to our non-car question. We can do some of them. Catherine Cox, which, by the way, Catherine, you asked some of the better questions. You got to give other people a chance. Other people, I challenge you to beat Catherine.
What do you got? What's Catherine's question?
So Catherine's question is, do you still go to the movies, or do you wait for it to be available via streaming? And Asphalt Angel asks, what is the best meal you ever had?
Oh, man. Those are good ones.
They are good.
The movie one. Let's do the movie one first. That's an easy one. Let's start there. Well,
so Catherine's question.
Yeah. What do you do?
I'd rather always go to the movies. Like, when you see a preview, it's like, that's a movie. Or that's a wait till it comes out. So if it's a comedies you don't have to see on the big screen. But if it's got a lot of cool CGI, action, explosions, I want to see that on the big screen. So for me,
really,
yeah, I'll still go to the movies. Like every Marvel movie, I'm going to the movies. Bad Boys 3, I'm going to the movies.
You're still old school like that, huh?
Yeah, it's a great experience. I can't wait because I blame social media because they fuck everything up. Like, I can't wait to go to the movies to see this stuff. I don't care about the popcorn. So it sounds like you're not. Like, what do you do?
I don't know, man. There's no appeal to me anymore to walk into a movie theater. I worked at a movie theater. It was my first job out of high school. I don't know. There's not an appeal. I don't want to sit around with a bunch of people in a small, theater or a theater. Yeah. And, wait in line and watch previews and then, have to jump in the car afterwards and drive home when I could just, assuming you can get a decent quality version of that movie, I'll pick home all day long, dude. All day long.
What's the last movie you went to go see?
Toy Story 4.
It's been a minute.
Because I took my kids.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what happens when you take your kids to the movies? This is exactly what happened to me when I was a kid and my dad would take us to the movies. I fall asleep. And they end up watching
your kids fell asleep?
No, I fall asleep.
Oh, you fell asleep when you went in Toy Story 4?
Yeah. And so what I ended up doing is just watching it at home, pirated. So the experience of sitting in a theater doesn't appeal to me anymore because a lot of times I end up falling asleep anyway, regardless of what the movie is.
So you don't go for like Fast and Furious or any of that? Like there's some movies you have to see at the movies.
No, man. No. Like Ford versus Ferrari?
Bro, this is the last podcast we're doing together, by the way. So
dude, I have it's like I don't play a lot of golf anymore because I don't have the time to go out for 4 hours and sit somewhere and play golf. Where's 4 hours in your day, dude? That's a lot of time. I try to play golf, but I can't do it all the time. The movie theater is a process. You got to get in the car. You got to go there. You got to come back. I can just turn it on my TV. It's a convenience revolution, bro. Like everything is like at your fingertips. Ford versus Ferrari came out on streaming like last week, and when was it in the theater? It was like a month ago.
At least.
It's crazy. It's that close now.
Ford versus Ferrari, I've been talking about it on the podcast. I eventually went to go see it, and I was watching it by myself one night at the movies. Now, that's a movie I could have easily watched without having to go to the movies.
Yeah. But I get it. I get why you say there are certain movies you got to go to the theater. Maybe I'm the minority.
Do you know what the best meal you've ever had is? Or what's something, let me rephrase that. What's the best thing you've ever eaten? Because that's not the same as the best meal you've ever had.
I'll have to think about that. You go first. Let me think about this one. I have a couple.
So one of the best things I've ever eaten, there's a place called Doc B's. And I think they're a small chain. The one I went to is in Fort Worth. And there's a little area called the Shops at Clear Fork. So at Doc B's, this was an appetizer, but it was basically like a full meal. Because what it is a giant Wagyu-based spicy meatball with lightly butter-crusted Texas toast. And actually, that Texas toast tastes like the Hawaiian King rolls.
Yeah.
Which are fucking delicious.
Yeah, I love those.
I remember I was eating this thing, and I remember thinking like, holy shit. Not only is this way over for an appetizer, but this might be the best thing I've ever fucking eaten. And and I went back because so for us consultants, we do this thing. It's like when you go someplace for the first time, you love it. Like Michael Jordan's Steakhouse in Chicago. It seems like it would be kind of like, that place is fucking legit.
Right.
And due to contrary belief, from a steakhouse perspective, it's not nearly as expensive as it could be. Like it's reasonably priced for a steakhouse. I mean, you know steakhouses, you're kind of like me. Now people who don't go to steakhouses be like, yo, that shit's expensive.
You're talking about the one now versus the one back in the day.
The more recent. But like a place like that, you go the first time and you love it and you're afraid to go back. Because the second time is never as good as the first time.
No.
And if your first time sucks, you ain't going back anyway. So we went to Michael Jordan Steakhouse a couple times as a group and we loved it both times. And so this place, Doc B's, I went back and ordered this again a few months later and it was just as good. So for me, this giant Wagyu meatball with these 4 gigantic slices of Texas toast, which is basically they stole it from Hawaiian King roll, is the best thing I've ever eaten.
So I go to San Francisco a lot for work. We go up there every now and again as a family just for vacation, but we are really big into ramen. But there is a spot in downtown San Francisco and it's called a Mensho, MENSHO. It's a tiny, probably 10 tables inside, maybe less. And they have this bowl of ramen that's so creamy. The pork tonkatsu broth that has like a super creamy texture to it. And
you
then
add extra katsu to it?
Yeah, you can add extra katsu, but you can have it with the pork belly.
Get the duck egg in it.
And a duck egg. You can have it in a couple of different ways. You can have it spicy, but they hand make all their noodles. Everything is like super like craft. Everything's made in the back kind of situation. And it tastes so rich when you're eating it. You've never tasted a bowl of ramen this rich before. That's how creamy it is. It's like a James Beard winner type of spot, right? It doesn't look fancy. It's not, right? You get in there, you eat and you leave because there's a long ass line outside and they don't want you staying long. Their claim to fame is not only their creamy broth, but you can put duck instead of pork chashu in it. You can put duck chashu in it. It's probably the best bowl of ramen. It is the best bowl of ramen I've ever had.
Let's go to the car question. So we have several we could choose from. Ryan A. Anwar. Is a company more financially successful when it's run by engineers, designers, or marketing? Which I think is a good question. Will Lotus, mutual friend of ours, can you trust employees in an oil change shop?
Let's do the first one.
The car company?
Let's do the first one. Yeah, that's a good question, man.
I think it's a great question, actually. I might send him a coaster.
Yeah. No, that...
So is it engineers, designers, or marketing? You get to go first.
Repeat the question.
Is a car company more financially successful when it's run by engineers, designers, or marketing?
Financially successful. That's the key, right?
It is the key.
So let's think about this, and I'm gonna talk out loud, right? So,
and you're right. I didn't think about it when I was writing it down, but that is the key part of this question.
So, what car companies are financially successful? You think about Toyota. You think about a company that builds millions and millions of cars like Toyota, which is, a kind of middle tier.
Isn't Toyota the guy who was like hiding from his shit though?
No, that's Nissan. That's Gosen.
Oh, that's a funny story, by the way. But anyway, continue with your answer.
That's a different podcast, but that's a crazy story, dude. That shit is fucking crazy.
Some TV shit.
It is. So Toyota is financially successful because it builds cars that everybody buys. Their marketing is not that great, even though they have, pretty consistent marketing, I would say. Their cars haven't been that inspirational until recently, in my opinion, with the new Supra, as well as where they coming out with like a 8086 kind of thing. They thought it was going to be like a MR2 or like a reborn Celica or whatever, but there's some cool shit coming out from Toyota. But for the most part, consistent, right? They don't do a ton of like crazy marketing. And then the designers, the Toyota cars these days, like the TRD Camry, that's a good looking car, man. I have to admit, I like it. Some of the other cars starting to look a little edgier with the TRD stuff. So what I'm trying to say, what we're probably getting to is, out of all of those components of Toyota, what makes it successful, to me, is probably the car itself, right? The engineering, right? It's reliable, it's reputable, you know what you're getting, it's always engineered well. It's almost just like an incremental improvement over the last year, and everybody buys them, man. Like, it's just so wildly popular. So if you compare that to a company like a Porsche that's not doing as many vehicles, or an Audi or a BMW, I think it's hands down. You got to be the engineering, in my opinion. That's my first thought. What do you think?
I think in order for a car company to be financially successful, you actually, not to cop out here, but you actually need to have a little bit of each. So the designers are the visual. They design a cool car. The engineers are responsible for making the design come to life. So if the engineering is fucked up, it doesn't take too long. Let's look at Mazda's FDRX7, 93 to 98? Or was it 97? That car looked great, engineered like shit. Every engine blew by 60,000 miles. Great marketing. That car, in my opinion, was a huge failure. Now, Fast and Furious in the import world has helped keep it afloat, but I feel like Mazda never recovered from that. And then when they came out with the RX-8, that was also a huge flop because they promised all this shit and the engineers couldn't make it work. And that car was a huge flop because Mazda's marketing, that was a good marketing campaign. But I think if the designer is good, the engineer is good, the marketing is what actually makes a company financially successful. Because you take a look at companies who get full of themselves. And again, this is coming from a car guy who doesn't know shit about cars. You look at Lamborghini and Ferrari. Like, does Ferrari even own Ferrari? Because I know Lamborghini doesn't own Lamborghini. Audi might own Lamborghini. Like, I'm not sure. I'm a Volkswagen. So I feel like marketing is more responsible. All three of them together, but if I had to assign a percentage, and my math sucks, but I would say design is a decent percentage, engineers is a decent percentage, and marketing is a decent percentage plus one. So if they're all 33, marketing would be 34%.
Yeah, you did cop out on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
It makes sense.
As a push, right? As a push, and a camel push.
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's a lot of different ways to answer it. I think At the end of the day, you're right. It's a mix of everything. Yeah, you probably do a little case study on each car company. Take Porsche, for instance, right? For a long time in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, they were in trouble, and their marketing was a big deal to attracting people and keeping that kind of interest and appeal of buying a Porsche. But behind the scenes, they were in trouble, right?
There are two Porsche ads that always stand out to me, and they're always from that era. One of them was Kills Bugs Fast, which is your model Porsche Turbo. Arena Red Porsche Turbo poster. I was obsessed with that. Kills Bugs Fast. I was just like, oh my God. And then they had one that says, a lot of companies have a sports car in their lineup. Porsche has a lineup of sports cars. For me, that was badass too. And both of those.
I love that you remember it, dude.
Yeah, dude. Those
are memorable.
The beds in your head is like, whoa, what's up? You know.
Yeah.
And can you trust employees at an oil change shop?
What other answer is there to that question? Then no.
You mean yes or no?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's no way. The only reason you go to a Jiffy Lube and whatever is because you don't want to.
You don't know how to do your shit,
and you don't know how to do your shit, and or you have no fucking clue about cars.
Is there anything more simple than an oil change? Like, just think about it.
No, you know what? Changing your light bulb in your car is harder than doing an oil change.
It can be, because some cars you have to pull out the whole fucking front bumper, which is bullshit, by the way.
So some people don't know how to change a tire, dude. Right? I felt like in high school we learned that in auto shop class. In my high school you had to take autos, and the first thing they taught you was how to change a tire.
You had an auto shop class?
Yeah, we had an auto shop, dude. It wasn't great. We were working on old shit, and the first thing they taught you was how to change a tire. But there are people out there that don't know how to change a tire, but it's probably easy to change the oil in a car.
Yeah, because you pull the drain plug, you let that shit leak out, you put the plug back, you take the oil filter off, and you put a new oil filter on, you lube it first. You got to, dip your finger in the oil and put it on the gasket, then tighten it up, and you just pour more oil on the top, and you're done. That's it. You're done.
My brother-in-law had an FJ, which is a cool car, right? I think he took it to one of those shops, and they forgot to tighten the drain bolt, and so he's driving it, and the engine seized, after 30 minutes of driving it. And got stuck on the side of the road. He didn't know what was going on. They forgot to tighten the drain bolt or put it back on or whatever the fuck.
They didn't put a crush washer on there, probably.
Yeah, and the car was ruined, dude. FJ, which is that's
a Toyota.
Toyota FJ, right? Those are
those weird looking SUV thingies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People love those cars. I mean, they hold their value. I was like, really? That's fucking crazy. So I'll never, if I was in high school and I wanted a job, I definitely would want to work there because I like cars. But would I ever trust taking a car there? Unless I didn't know anything about cars and I had no fucking clue, then I get it. But there's no way I'm trusting any of those guys.
I mean, why not pay the extra $30 and take it to the dealership? If you're going to do an oil change from somebody other than yourself. Because a lot of people don't want to fuck with this shit. Like, I don't change my own oil all the time, but I know how to do it. But I'd rather take my Infiniti to Culture Infiniti than take it to Firestone. Because the dealership...
But people do it.
Yeah, the dealership knows if they screw up, that's on them. So, for my answer to that, because I wasn't quite sure until I listened to you. That's why I made you go first. But... Can you trust employees at an oil change shop? I mean, there's a lot of variables in there. I used to have a buddy who ran a Valvoline. I would take my Integra there, and I knew that I could trust it because he's the manager and he's making sure my shit was done right. But also, to your horror story you just told, and even Marcelo took his Audi A5, my son, recently before he sold it, to a Firestone down the street. And I came home one day and I'm like, we're still leaking oil again?
Right.
There's an oil spot. And I asked him about it, and he's like, he noticed it, and he called them like a few days later, and they knew exactly who he was. He's like, hey, I was in there last weekend, and I'm leaking oil.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, is this an Audi A5 black? I'm like, what the fuck? So shit like that. And it was just like you said, it was the drain plug. So my guess is they didn't put the crush washer in there before they tighten it up. And so what happens if they don't do their job correctly and your car blows up? Like, I don't know what the recourse is. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, can you trust them? I guess not. But that doesn't mean you don't take your car there. But just do your due diligence. Is it a reputable shop? Is it something I could take to someone? Do I have a friend who will do it for $20? Should I just take it to the dealership? You know, because here's the thing. So a lot of these shops advertise, okay, get your oil changed for $20. So that's your filter, the labor, and the oil. Now, if you have synthetic oil or blend, you're not getting it for $20 because synthetic oil is expensive.
Right.
And those are the places that are going to charge you $80 and up. So some place says, I'm going to charge you $80 because you have synthetic oil. Don't immediately think, oh, that's way too expensive. I could take it down the street and get it done for $20. Because if your car needs synthetic oil, guess what? You're not getting it for $20. That same shop will turn around and say, well, here's the thing is, you have synthetic oil. It's a special oil. It's Audi oil. And it's like pink. So we got to go to the dealership and get it. And it's going to cost you $85. So you might as well just go to the dealership and pay whatever the cost, because the oil change is like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And just get it done there if you're not doing it yourself.
My brother's a mechanic for Honda for 10, 15 years. Mechanics at dealerships, regardless of whatever brand you work for, they have zero respect and trust in those spots, those little oil change spots. So,
like a Jiffy Lube or Valvoline or something.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's like
you probably don't have to be an ASC certified fucking mechanic to work at those places.
I don't know.
You just have to be able to unscrew a fucking drain bolt and pull it out.
Maybe they're students at UTI or whatever, which is where my brother went to school. It's cool. That's what I had to say about that. Hell no. If you're taking a car to that shop, then you're you should expect bad things to happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. So those are our car questions from Instagram. I appreciate it. Anything you want to talk about? You want to pimp anything before I go into my closing? Maybe LastEra brand or Eeps 993 or something? Yeah,
no, we're just always excited to continue to bring race-inspired apparel and motorsport focused clothing and accessories to other enthusiasts. So check out our page on social media at LastEra brand. We're always coming out with some new gear, dropping some new shirts, hoodies, hats, you name it, throughout the year. So give us a shout. Check out our Instagram. You can find us on www.lasterabrand.com, our website. If you want to check out the actual gear we have. And you can get in touch with me on my personal page at Eeps993 as well. So
is that Eeps _993?
Is it?
Isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea.
So there you have it.
I think so.
Yeah, there you have it. So thank you, Eric, for joining us. Special thanks to the Passion Hi-Fi for the tunes, which I've downloaded from SoundCloud. I may or may not switch up my music going forward. I don't know. There's some other stuff I want to use, but I really like this music. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor FM. Actually, they don't sponsor it, but they host it, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many, many more. Special thanks to NSX Channel. Special thanks to DressUpBolts.com. If you have any questions or feedback or topics, please DM me at NA2NSX on Instagram, or you can email me at hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. And like I always say, Eric, what do I say? I said, let's grow this. Let's do this. Let's grow this thing together.
Tell a friend. That's all.
Yeah, tell a friend, man. You tell a friend. Yeah, tell a friend. I mean, actually, as of this podcast, I just checked and I got my statistics up to number 25 for automotive on iTunes, which is going to drop to probably to 100 next week. But if we keep releasing these podcasts, you keep telling a friend, you never know.
Tell a friend, man. Everyone likes to be part of the come up of like how things grow. So
absolutely,
all your friends and all the people that are listening, just tell one friend you never know, man. You might be that number one on that list sometime soon, and I know you'll get there.
And I want to thank you for supporting us from day one. So for Eric Pasia, this is Jhae Finning. This has been the Hard Parking Podcast. Thank you for your time, Eric. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Good night. Thanks.
All right. Good night, Eric. Pasia. Shut up!